It's the same as with any land. We just create the right environment. You know, there are preparations that we put down, and working with the lunar calendar and so forth. And with the preparations, it automatically encourages the regeneration, no matter how toxic it is.
Good.
We have done it also with land that has been bombarded with chemical applications, with biocides and chemical fertilizers. And it never fails, it regenerates. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but basically the moment you start putting those applications down, it starts to turn around, and using the lunar cycles, of which we have 3, as you will soon find out.
Yes, very exciting.
You know, in biodynamics, really, I have to say, it flows in my blood. I took it up with my mother's milk, and it's as simple as that.
Yes.
I came into it, but then I really did take it a bit further, because I worked as a volunteer in 2 biodynamic farms, one in north of Boulder and one in Australia. And that really was the crowning glory, I think, because you get so involved in a bigger area. And it was always they were always very happy when they said, oh, today we have to do this. Oh, Gerlinde is coming. She knows what to do. We don't have to explain it.
There you go. There you go.
And that was really great. Of course, we have 3 lectures. You might know that. Next week, we go specifically into how to actually make these preparations from scratch, although that's no longer needed totally, but it is available. And then the other thing we do is do how to do a biodynamic compost. And that, you know, those are the major ingredients: lunar cycle, compost, and applications.
Yeah.
All right.
So we have 11 participants here, and it's 12 noon, so I should probably start this and welcome our
Good idea.
Linda, as well as all of you. We actually have about 30 people that are going to show up, so from time to time, be paying attention to the panel here so that I can admit them to the quote room. Hi, Sarah. Sarah Ellington has just joined us. We have a variety of people from all over. And so I'm here today wearing 2 hats. One is Bee City USA, Phoenix, and the other is Cascade Girl, which is a nonprofit here in Southern Oregon. And our mission focuses on the survival of bees and other pollinators. And you can find out more about us at www.cascadegirl.org. Also, Bee City USA, if you're not familiar with it, that's a really good organization to look up. There are chapters in probably well over 100, I'd say well over 100 cities at this point in time, as well as Bee Campus USAs, which are active all over the United States presently. So you should have received an email from me. Oops, I'm going to admit a few more people. There we go. So Annie Drager and Karen Layfield have just joined us, along with Julie Green.
Oh,
so in the email that you got from me in the middle of the night, you'll have 3 links which Gerlinde is going to refer to, and it's these links will be probably essential if you want to go the next step with biodynamic gardening. And Scott Good is joining us. Welcome, Scott. Welcome, Julie. So, as many of you know, we had an event in this valley which decimated an extensive area, including over 2,600 structures, and the outcome is the loss of habitat for people, pollinators, and animals. And we hope to invite them back. So, hence this presentation. A little bit about Gerlinde. She studied in Vienna as a young woman and then completed her initial degree by finishing at Cambridge. She studied philosophy with an emphasis on Goethe and Schiller. She got her PhD in Eastern philosophy, and she's taught Sanskrit at Naropa Institute for nearly 3 decades, which is amazing. I actually know people who studied with her way back. She teaches quigong and taiji for the last 46 years. She also is currently a volunteer to provide support to Vietnam veterans, and now she leads the Talent Oregon chapter of Bee City, USA, which was formerly led by Dolly Warden, who I believe has joined us today. So I was at Gerlinde's house yesterday, and the aroma in that house was fabulous. And I just couldn't figure out what it was. But she finally told me, and she's going to tell you today. And she told me a little bit more about biodynamic gardening, which we hope to use to kind of invite back the pollinators to Phoenix. And you know, the Bible verse, "There's time for every season under heaven," just kept ringing through my head, because basically that's what she was telling me. And she was talking about how to use the natural world as guidance. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just turn this over to Gerlinde at this point in time. I also want to tell you that we're going to have not one, but 2 more follow-ups, and that those follow-ups are going to be in February and March. So if you're really interested today, I'll be putting out a link for February 7th and then Saturday, March 13th, where we're going to have follow-ups and learn more about practical application as well as theory, right, Gerlinde?
Yes, indeed. Well, I want to welcome everyone here today, and a special thanks to the lovely, wonderful Sharon, who is such a treasure. And I'm here basically because of the Almeida fire, that infamous fire that destroyed so much on September 8th. And I want to say here that our lovely Sharon has also lost her home in that fire in Phoenix. So kudos to her to have even revved herself up to make this possible. I just admire you, Sharon, for this.
Oh, thank you so very much. And as you know, the feeling is totally mutual, because we both had events in terms of losses. And I think both of us are looking forward to creating a better Phoenix. And I've chosen to see this as purification by fire, which is one of the elements that Gerlinde is also going to talk about today.
So, of course, we lost so many homes, and so many people are destitute and truly devastated. Their lives are never the same. Slowly, there's an emergence of newness, but it will take a time and patience. But in this, there is a lot of hope, and I hope I can help with that a little bit. Before I start with the actual talk, I always start things biodynamically and in that realm with a verse. And so you can just sit back, it's a very short verse, and relax. Heal yourself, my dear one, with the kisses from the wind and the embrace of the rain. Stand strong with your bare feet on the earth and with all that is born here. Get wiser each day by following your intuition. See the world through your open heart. Jump, dance, sing, to live more joyfully. So now we'll start with the nuts and bolts of biodynamics. Some of you may have heard that there was this wonderful, innovative man, Dr. Rudolf Steiner. He was an Austrian like me, and he lived from 1861 to 1925. He was the one to whom we owe anthroposophy, the Waldorf schools, anthroposophic medicine, eurythmy, and biodynamic farming and gardening. It was in the early 1920s when farmers approached him. They were from a region called Silesia, which used to belong to Germany, now it's southwestern Poland. And they asked him whether he would help them, because you see, in the 19th century, the chemical companies started to produce fertilizers, chemical fertilizers. and they were in the form of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And they were mainly in a powder form. And of course, they sold them a pack of lies with the promise that their land would be more fertile, their crops would be more prolific. And they bought that. We still are bombarded with that in an even more cruel way through the advent of biocides, pesticides, herbicides, and so forth, as well as chemical fertilizers. But these farmers noticed an incredible decline in their land fertility and in their crops. So what happened was they approached Steiner, having heard about the wondrous things that he already had established. And then it was in June of 1924 where he gave 8 lectures and 5 discussion groups on how to work with the land in a very comprehensive way. And thus biodynamics was born. Now, paradoxically, the organic movement derived from biodynamics. It wasn't there before. So let me tell you what biodynamics stands for. Bio, or bio in Greek, means life. Dynamics means active, energetic. And that's exactly what it is. Often it is depicted as a symbol by the Greek goddess Demeter. Demeter was the Greek goddess for grain and harvest. And it's a very appropriate symbol, I might add. Biodynamics encourages you to imagine things that seem impossible. It means gardening in the service of life. Initially, it may require a bit of a leap of faith, but when you see the results, you realize that everything works the way you have imagined it, and so much more. Biodynamic improves biodiversity, the quality of food, and the quality of the life of the gardener. It's a win-win. It leaves the land a lot better than what it was originally, and with much more fertility. It regenerates the land and all its inhabitants. And that is amazing because it gets better and better with each and every year. A biodynamic garden or farm is viewed as a complete organism. We refer to with this to soil, plants, all the animals, whether they are below ground, above ground, whether they are in the air and land on the land. Also, if you have a stream or any kind of water, the aquatic life in that water, all the humans. But also, we invite the elemental forces, and you may say, what the heck is that? Well, these are unseen forces, but these are kind of viewed as guardians of our land. They are part of the Devic or angelic kingdom. If someone has clairvoyance, they actually see them. They can communicate with them if they have clairaudience. And they're often depicted as gnomes and sprites and elves and fairies. They're very real. But they will not stay on the land if the land has been destroyed, especially through chemical means, but also various other mechanisms that just are destructive. But we consciously invite them in because we want their energy to be present, to protect the plants, to protect the animals, and to help us in co-creating a better world. And then we are also tied into the celestial forces. You know, anyone that's an astrologer, and I know we have Scott Good with us, and Scott is an excellent astrologer. You know the influences of our planets. And in biodynamics, we are especially concerned with the influences of the lunar cycles, the moon, they have an enormous impact on our gardens, on our plants, and on us. So we really tune into those. Then what we also do is, we are no longer at war with certain bugs or certain weeds. It means being a part of the earth and not conquering it. So often we look for solutions. How can we destroy this weed and how can we do that? We don't do that. We use methods, but we create more a balancing atmosphere. And that's the big difference. As you know, the sun rises in the spring and into summer through the earth then receives more light, so the plants can grow upward and outward. It encourages growth, but it also encourages them to reproduce. Then during winter and autumn and winter, really, when the sun sinks lower and the days get shorter, the plants contract back into the soil. And it's their dormant phase. Now, what you may not know is during that dormant phase, and we are right in that dormant phase now, the roots have a field day. They get established during that time. And the soil during that time is at its most active. That's why in the biodynamic field, we really encourage people to apply compost. We talk about biodynamic compost in a little while, on the land so that the nutrients can go in the soil, so the soil can actually do the work during fall and winter. Everything, of course, starts with the soil. This is where our focus should lie, and in biodynamics, that's an inevitable part. In a healthy soil, everything will thrive. My late husband would say you can put a broomstick in there and will grow. Not quite, but yeah, he got a point. It provides also a much higher nutrition to both animals, think pollinators also, and humans. And let's face it, there's a lot of pleasure derived when we feel healthy. Furthermore, it helps to combat climate change like no other method. And let's face it, I don't even call it climate change. We are in a climate collapse. And we saw that with the Almeida fires on September 8th. We had ferocious winds on that day that were unprecedented. But we see it everywhere. We have major floods. We have hurricanes and tornadoes that are just out of bounds. When we establish a new garden, or when you want to kind of do a little bit of changing around in your existing garden, you might have an area where you go, well, I can do something more, or an area where you go, yeah, this doesn't really work. The best way to do this is to plot out your garden. In other words, you make a plan. And I want to say, just recently, just a little over 2 months ago, I moved into a brand new house with brand new land that has never been gardened. Excuse me for a moment. And the first thing I do, and I did, and I held it up, was create my plan for the new garden. And as you can see, it's really important. I'm not going to barrage you with this, because we want to really see, first of all, you need to know which direction the garden faces, whether it's north, south, east, or west. That's, of course, very important. What type of soil you have. In our Rogue Valley, we have a preponderance of clay soil, but people who live not in this area, they may have a sandy soil, and those who are blessed, hallelujah, they may have loam, but that's a rare occurrence, let's face it. So we need to put this all into consideration. Then also, how much shade do you get? How much sun do you get? Do structures on your property, such as homes, trees, or taller shrubs, do they cast shadow? Because if you have a lot of shade, you certainly wouldn't want to grow peppers, would you? No, not really. So this is all you can map this out. Winter is a great time to do that, of course, because you have more time. And then you really ought to consider raised beds. I'm taking just a drink of water for a moment. Excuse me for a sec here. Now, when we plant annual flower beds and or vegetables, we want raised beds. They don't necessarily have to be in a frame, like a wood frame or one made of bricks or whatever one uses. You just need to elevate the soil even by, say, 6 inches, because we want to create more airflow. But in a biodynamic garden, we find when we have raised soil level, the earthworms become extremely prolific. You don't even have to propagate your own worms. They will come, and by golly, they will propagate before you even know it. So that is also very important. And then in my case, I told you I've only been in my new home for just a little over 2 months. I established already the raised beds, and that's for vegetables. And in a later lecture, I'll go into very great depth, but we do crop rotation. So I have 4 vegetable beds, and also for berries. They're very, very good in raised beds. Now, some of them, they may be perennials, but they just do better in a raised bed. Then you also ought to see, where do I want to put a water feature? You might want to put a bird bath in. And if you want to attract pollinator, and of course, I hope that all of you do, then you need a shallow dish with a few pebbles with water for the pollinators to drink from. You need those pebbles as a landing zone so they don't drown. And then the other very important thing in biodynamic gardening is the compost. Ideally, but it can't always happen. It depends on the layout of your garden. A compost should be either north or northwest. But if that's not possible, any compost anywhere else will be fine. And in the most ideal way, a compost should be near elderberries. In my case, I will not put native elderberries in because I actually harvest them for medicinal purposes, but you can definitely put native elderberries in. There's often a misconception about native plants. I will say that. I recently heard, biodynamics, you really don't want native plants. Well, quite the opposite is true. We actually love native plants because they coexisted for hundreds of years with our native pollinators. And we have just in native bee species here in Oregon over 500. So it's very vital. But of course, in a garden, we grow other things too. But, if anyone tells you biodynamics doesn't honor native plants, please dispel that myth. One of the principles in biodynamic gardening or farming is following the lunar phase, the moon phase. You know when we rotate around the sun, that takes about a year, 365 and a quarter days. So every 4 years, that's why we have a leap year and add another day. We move through the entire zodiac sign, from Pisces all the way through to Aries. With the moon, it doesn't take long at all. It takes precisely 27.3 days until the moon moves through the entire zodiac sign. Why is that important? Well, we plant by the zodiac. You may not know what the signs are, so I will give you a bit of clarity. We start with the fire signs. These are respectively Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. When the moon is in a fire sign, we attract to the earth a lot of that warm quality. Even in the depths of winter, there is that warm quality that pervades us. And you may not feel it outwardly, but it's there. And it really reaches the highest portion of the plant. So this is a time where we plant any fruit-bearing plants. These can be fruit trees, berries that are being consumed, tomatoes, all the squashes, and there are so many more. When we plant those when the moon is in a fire sign, the energy will always be pervasive in the upper portion of the plant. So the fruit ripens better. And it also it lasts a lot longer. It doesn't deteriorate so fast. Then we go to the next ones, and they are earth signs. The 3 earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. When the moon is in any of those, we plant anything that grows roots. And the energy then goes into the soil below ground. And so it's very important, if you plant vegetables, to put your carrots, onions, parsnips, turnips, radishes in. That is so important. And I hope I have it here, but there's a little thing that, I have it here, and hopefully you can see it if I hold it up. The radishes on this side were grown when the moon was in an earth sign, and here when the moon was in a water sign. You see the difference? Vast difference. But it's not just the shape, it's the quality that is very enhanced when you do the planting accordingly. And then we go we go to the air signs. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. When the moon is in any of those, we plant anything that has flowers. But because the energy and through that air quality promotes beautiful flowers. They have a stronger scent that's very important for pollinators. They have a better quality nectar as well as pollen. And they also last a lot longer. They have much more vibrant colors. So these are, this is just very, very true and wonderful. And then finally, we go into the last 3 water signs, and they are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. In a water sign, we plant predominantly leafy greens. In fact, leafy greens like lettuce and radicchio and endive and kale and, any cabbages, all the leafy greens, because this is when the water is much more concentrated to create leaves. I'll share with you a little story. Some of you may have known and will have known my late husband. We were married for 35 years. And when we first met and were married, he had no idea about biodynamics, but he had a very open mind and an open heart. But he was also an excellent astrologer. So he said, well, can we just try it out to see how this really works? And so we lived in Colorado at the time, in Boulder to be precise. So I planted a row of, I think they were zinnias from memory, when the moon was in Gemini. Now that's an air sign, and that's ideal to plant flowers. And then a day and a half later, when the moon changed to Cancer, I planted another row, same packet, same seeds, and it was a water sign. And then my darling husband felt that the water sign was definitely, those were his plants. And when after they germinated, they grew, and obviously the foliage in his plants were absolutely exquisite. And he kept saying to me, well, look at my plants. They look so great. And I go, very casually. And then when the flowers started to emerge, you know how that is, he all of a sudden looked a little bit more funny. And he said, oh my God, you have so many more flowers. And I go, bingo. and then when they started to bloom, he also saw there was a difference in vibrancy in my flowers versus his. His was still beautiful, but the foliage was really the preponderance, whereas mine, there were the flowers. But what was very incredible, we observed the various pollinators. And while we had pollinators in all plants, and those, of course, we found that the pollinators accumulated much more in the ones that were planted in an air sign, namely here Gemini. It was absolutely incredible. There were just almost twice as many pollinators on those blooms. So there is the proof was in the pudding, and he was forever converted. In the same cycle, that zodiac cycle, that 27.3-day cycle that the moon goes through, there's also an ascending and a descending cycle. And I better break that down because not everyone is an astrologer. You know, recently we just had our winter solstice. It was December 21st. That's when we experienced the longest night and the shortest day. And then now we are headed toward the summer solstice, which is in June. So we started out when the sun, not the moon, because I'm giving a comparison here, was in Sagittarius, and then we're moving to when the sun is in Gemini, which will be in June. That cycle, because the days are growing longer and the nights shorter, is called the ascending cycle. The descending cycle starts at the summer solstice and goes to the winter solstice. So each of those cycles is approximately in the moons. The moon has the same equivalent, except it doesn't take 6 months. It takes merely 13.8 days, something like this. You just have to see what sign the moon will be in. If it's between Sagittarius and Gemini, it's the ascending cycle. If it's between Gemini and Sagittarius, it's the descending cycle. Why is that important? In the ascending cycle, when we pick fruit, it stores a lot better. It's also great if you want to graft some trees. You know, you take tree cuttings off, because the energy in an ascending cycle is much more at the top of a plant. So when you get a cutting and you then graft it onto another tree, that new graft will be a lot stronger and the tree much more prolific in fruit or whatever else you plant. In the descending cycle, when the moon travels from Gemini through Sagittarius, the sap is much more concentrated in the lower parts. This is an ideal time to transplant plants because they can get well established, but you still have to transplant according to what they bear. You know, if you have lettuce, you want to make sure it's in a descending moon, but also in a water sign. And if you transplant strawberries, that's a fruit-bearing plant, you want to make sure it's a descending moon, but in a fire sign. So that's how it goes. Most importantly will always be the zodiac in terms of fire, earth, air, and water. The ascending and descending, sure, you can observe, but it's a more secondary thing, but also vital. Then we have another cycle, a moon cycle, that's 29.5 days. Now I'm really confusing the issue. And that's between a full moon and a new moon. And, you know, we are usually quite affected. emotions change, but so do the plants, so does the land. It is unbelievable what an effect that cycle also has on us. One thing I want to say, before a full moon, about 2-3 days before full moon, it's really good to sow seeds, providing it's in the right category, fire, earth, air, and water. That's more important than whether it's a full moon or a new moon. And then toward a new moon, when the moon is waning, actually really shortly after full moon to when the moon becomes a new moon, this is a very, very important part if you want to prune trees or shrubs, because the sap sinks down a little bit into the earth. So we don't injure plants, we don't cause any hardships on the plants. And this is an ideal cycle to prune. So that's when the moon is waning toward a new moon. And then we have yet another cycle. Sorry to bombard you with it, but it's so important. And that is, how the moon makes an orbit around our Earth, and it's kind of a boomerang orbit. You may have heard about it because the moon landing is done when the moon is closest to the Earth, because they don't have to travel that far. Well, that cycle is 27.5 days. Yeah, does that confuse you? Now, when the moon is furthest away from our Earth, it's called the moon is in apogee. That creates less, more of a weaker tidal wave or tides, because the moon governs our tides, but it also creates a more dry condition on Earth. It could still rain, but the Earth has more of a drier aspect. This is the only time, providing it coincides with an Earth Day, that you should plant potatoes. That's the only thing you should ever plant when the moon is in apogee, when it's furthest away. Nothing else will really thrive that much, but the potatoes that you then grow on those days will become much, much more vibrant, and they also store a lot longer. So that's important. When the moon is in perigee, that's when the moon is closest to our Earth. The tides are a lot stronger, and we actually incur much more of that water energy. Ideally, we plant very little on that day, but you can plant leafy greens because they are of the water element, providing you don't grow them so that you also collect seeds from them. Because if you are relying on the seeds that you have planted in a perigee moon in a leafy plant, the seeds will be very weak. I'm going to give you, because you go, well, how the heck do I know when the moon is in apogee, perigee, what zodiac it is? Well, of course, an astrologer would know because we have an ephemeris for that. But there is a wonderful website, which is called Rhythm of Nature. Rhythm of Nature. It's free. You can Google it and it's right there. They have a biodynamic calendar and it will tell you exactly, usually when, say, today, for instance, the moon is in Sagittarius, it just moved over from Scorpio, you will find a strawberry right on that day and so forth. And on the side, because today is a perigee moon, the moon is closest to us today, it will say perigee. That very website also has a calendar for home and garden. For instance, it tells you when you harvest fruit, what would be a good day to actually preserve that fruit, or also root vegetables. It will also give you an indication when to clean windows so they're streak-free. Now, it will demand a little elbow grease, but nevertheless, it gives you many good ideas. And then it also has one for health and beauty, believe it or not. It tells you when to wash your hair, when to cut your hair, for those who color their hair, when to color the hair, and so forth. But it is an amazing website. The one that is often promoted and always promoted in biodynamics is the Maria Thun one. I have it just as an example, but please do not use the calendar. You can use anything in there, but the calendar is about a day off. We use sidereal time, and if you compare the Maria Thun calendar with an ephemeris, you'll find it's about a day off, and a day makes a huge difference since the moon travels through the zodiac so quickly.
Gerlinde, I wondered if you were willing to take a few questions at this point in time.
I will, but one more thing, because I'm just going to show you that on my iPhone. Hang on a sec. Yeah, okay. Sorry about my delay here. There is another one which is called Moon Rider. You can download it for free on any, it's loading up. Hang on just a sec, or maybe not. Well, the Moon Rider will also give you, it's free for any smartphone, and that'll give you what zodiac sign the moon is in, whether it's, today would be Sagittarius, and it will also say perigee moon. So this is vital because you can have it always on hand. And even though I have my electric gadget, my cell phone with me, I want to just give a shout out. When you work in the garden, whether you have a biodynamic or another garden, it doesn't matter. Please don't use your cell phones. It disturbs the habitat of so many living entities in your garden. I do take it with me, but put it usually far on my patio just to take a photo because I use my cell phone. But it's really not good for any of the living things in your garden, including you. And often people go, well, I texted you 10 times. And I go, well, sorry, I don't use my cell phone that often. So there you go. Now let's open it to a few questions.
I've received 2 questions, and then we can take them from others. You can either ask them directly or you can ask them in the chat. The first one was, why should compost be north or narrowest? I don't know if she means northwest. Why should the compost be north or narrowest of the garden?
It's the best influence because in biodynamics, we don't just create a compost, I mean, most of you know, those who are organically involved, they go, oh, we have a lovely, crumbly, beautiful compost. In biodynamics, we create a colloidal compost. And the energy of north-northwest is very beneficial to interact with the preparations that we put into the compost. And so that direction is favorable. But it's not, if you can't have a compost in north-northwest because of whatever circumstances your property has, it really, choose another one. The main thing is that you create a colloidal compost.
The second question is from Jerry Quintero, and she asks, do you recommend the Stella Natura calendar? And then Annie Drager also asks, is the Stella Natura calendar accurate?
No, it isn't. It's about a day off, and you can check it out if you don't trust me. Look at any ephemeris. There's a Swiss ephemeris, you can look it online, and it doesn't coincide. It really is about a day off. I don't know whether they use Greenwich Mean Time. They say they didn't. I have in the past contacted them. I've given up. I think when Maria Thun created it, this was in the 1940s or even before, it was accurate, or so I have heard. now Michael Thun takes over, but I'm sure he's not responsible for the ephemeris either there or for the planting thing, but it is a day off. Whereas if you use Rhythm of Nature, you will find it totally coincides with any and all ephemerises because they all coincide. We don't, and you know, at one point I thought, well, but having been married to an excellent astrologer, I said to my husband, whose name was Mark, tell me, do they go by a heliocentric ephemeris? And he said, no, that would be very different. They still go with a sidereal, and that's what they claim too, but it just is about a day off. Compare, if you have a Maria Thun calendar, please compare it with your ephemeris and you'll find they're off.
The next question is also from Jerry. Should the compost pile be in the shade or the sun?
Doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. The direction is favorable north or northwest, but yeah, sun or shade doesn't matter in the compost.
This question is from Scott Good. If you purchase the Maria Thun Almanac, be sure you get the North American version. And that's not a question.
That's true, but that's still off.
Okay. And are the other calendars a full day off is another question.
No, the others are, the Rhythm of Nature is 100% accurate, as is the Moon Reader, which is more an ephemeris anyway, but it can be very beautifully used in our biodynamic world because it, you know, it has the zodiac in it exactly when the moon changes to another sign, and then it will also tell you perigee and apogee.
Annie Drager asks, can we use the Stella Natura by looking before or behind its calculations?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
I think she's wondering if you can add or subtract a day and therefore make it accurate. She says, can we use?
Yeah, you certainly can, but I would check it with an ephemeris so that you are really 100% accurate. Okay. You know, I kind of say it's approximately a day, and you know, it could be 26 hours instead of 24. So compared to an ephemeris or to the Rhythm of Nature, and then you'll find exactly how much it is off.
Okay. Are there other questions? Because we can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and then ask them directly if you'd like to. We'll have another QA at the end of the presentation, or close to the end.
We will. Shall we continue?
I think so.
Well, so the lunar cycles have now been thoroughly hashed out. It takes a little while until it becomes fully integrated. You know, I wake up in the morning and I know exactly where the moon is because the calendar is the first thing I consult every day. And usually I know it from the prior day what zodiac sign it is, because it also affects us as human beings, the lunar cycles. The other very, very important component, and equally important, are our biodynamic formulas. You can compare them a little bit to a homeopathic formula. You know, you get a small extract, and I'm going to bend down because I'm going to retrieve my box of biodynamic formulas for you. Just bending down. They should be stored in a wooden box, which I have here, and then I have them handy. In biodynamics, we have 9, well, we have more, but we have 9 numbered formulas, and they go from 500 through 508, and they're called BD, that stands for biodynamic, 500 through 508, and then we have 3 extracurricular products. These are the ones that make our garden biodynamic, no question about it. We do weird things. The first one is BD 500, which is known as horn manure. I'm going to do next week, next month, when I do the follow-up lecture, I will give you a total description how to do it from scratch. I have done it for decades from scratch. Now I go to the Josephine Porter Institute and get some of my products where I don't have to bury them under the ground anymore. But I think it's wonderful to learn how to do it and get really involved with the very basics of biodynamics. So back to BD 500, the horn manure. We take horns from a lactating cow. That's important. Cows and biodynamics are very important because the cows have a ruminant digestive tract. And so even the manure we get from a ruminant animal is very different from a different mammal. And we really like that ruminant digestion that has converted the manure into something very different. So we get these horns from a lactating cow, not from a feedlot, of course, ideally a biodynamic or an organic farm, but you can get it from the Josephine Porter Institute. And then in the fall, we stuff it with fresh cow manure. Those who are brave do it with their bare hands. I must say I always wore gloves when I did it. And then we bury it quite a bit into the ground, at least 18 inches. And we keep, we line them all nicely up and bury them underground. And then 6 months later, we have what is known as horn manure, which is one of the best soil fertilizers or soil preparations, because it's not a fertilizer, it's a preparation that helps the soil. By that time, you wouldn't even know it derived from manure. It's absolutely, it smells beautiful. It has an earthy smell. It's just lovely. I rhapsodize when I hear it. I don't have any horn manure to show you, but what can I say? So when it is applied to the garden, and it should be applied more to the soil, it's not a foliar spray, we then potentize it before that happens, or dynamize it. It's the same thing. We apply a small amount of this transformed manure, the horn manure, into pure, clean water. It can be rainwater. Rainwater is ideal, but certainly not a chemically treated water, and shouldn't be demineralized. You want the minerals in there. And then you start the stirring process. So you have a bucket and a stick, you can do it with your hand, and you stir it until a beautiful vortex is formed, a vibrant vortex. And then you disturb the vortex and go the other way around. So I start, for instance, going clockwise and then anti-clockwise. And so this is the mechanism to potentize, to dynamize this preparation and all preparations in biodynamics. This makes it so potent for our land to heal it. It helps to rekindle the life within the earth, and all life of all sentient beings that eat plants or part of plants. Think pollinator again, because when they have flowers that grow in a garden that was treated with these wonderful preparations, well, they stay a lot healthier too. Sorry, intermittently, I just need a sip of water. The next one, and I can show you what that looks like, is horn silica. It's a white powder. So, as I said, in the spring, you unearth the horn manure. By that time, it's beautifully cured. And then you start a new process. You crush quartz into a powder, real powder. And then you stuff it in clean cow horns and you bury it for 6 months. And it becomes the horn silica. It's really beautiful. Now, horn silica influences the flavor and the color of your plants. And it's a foliar spray, so you do not spray it on the ground, but you spray it in foliage. It should never be applied when there's frost on the ground. Usually applied, you know, a good sign is always once you've planted tomato plants or annual plants like zinnias, and they start having quite a good foliage, and then you want to apply that very wonderful horn silica spray, and a very light spray. It attracts the sun energy. So the horn manure what attracted the earth energy. So it's more the yin energy, that deep nurturing energy. Whereas the horn silica attracts the vibrancy from the sun and becomes the yang part of, so you have both yin and yang. They should not be applied together. They have to be spaced out if they coincide. But it is unbelievable what it does to the foliage. It's just really magical and a lot of fun to actually prepare. Then we have, and I'm going to just touch on them today because next time I really will go in depth with it. But we have the next 6 formulas. They are respectively BD 502 to 7. These are the formulas that we use either in compost to create a colloidal compost, or they are also part, and I have a ready-made one. I mean, this is a compost starter. It contains all those 6 that I'm about to describe. This comes from the Josephine Porter Institute. I used to make it myself, but I'm 72, what can I say? It's not that I've become totally lazy, but I have a lot of, you know, I'm getting older too, so I'm taking a little bit of the easy way out. And then it's also part of the field and garden spray, although that also has BD 500, the horn manure in it. I will also tell you how to use in a compost when we come to our compost talk. But let's start with BD 502. That's the first one, and that's yarrow. All these wonderful things need, you know, a special fermentation before they can be used. So don't think you can go out, harvest some yarrow when it comes into life again, and all is well. No. All of these preparations need various fermentation processes and maturing processes, and we use various animal products to cure them in. And they're in different cure times, different preparations, because they need to be transformed, just like the horn manure and the horn silica was. So it can get a little bit complex, not really, but it takes a lot of forethought. So once the yarrow has had that process of fermentation and maturing, it helps to regenerate the earth. It pulls carbon and nitrogen from out of the atmosphere into the soil, and that is what we want. So when you apply it as compost or as garden and field spray, you will find that it literally pulls the nitrogen and the carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it there. But it has to be that cured, fermented yarrow, not the one that you pick and go, oh, now I'm fine. No, it doesn't work that way. The next one is chamomile. Chamomile, again, as a preparation, as BD 503, it helps with decomposing the rougher materials that are in compost. It's a really, really great way to break down raw materials, and it's also very rich in both sulfur and calcium. I used to make, well, I can give you a good example because people always get a kick out of that when I share. This is just one example how to prepare this. In order to prepare chamomile, you have to first soak it and do a few things, and then you literally sow it in clean cow intestines. Oh yes, we do. You make little chamomile sausages, so to speak, and then we bury them too. And then there's a transformation that takes place. I had a good friend back in Boulder, Colorado. She and her husband have a biodynamic farm. And she and I would sit there making these sausages galore, and we had a great time with it. But that gives you an idea what it entails. You can't just go, well, I use this. No, it needs a very special process. The next one is BD504, and that's nettles. They actually don't need an animal product to get cured, but we also use a soaking process, and then they get buried for a whole year. The great thing with nettles is it combines the forces of both the earth and the sun, so it doesn't need an animal sheath. And it helps the soil to adapt individuality to all the different plants. Who knew, huh? As the plants become individualized, they become stronger and healthier and are not likely to have disease. They're also more resistant against any pests. Then we have BD505, that's oak bark. Oak bark, obviously that needs another animal sheath. We'll go into that next time. And it supplies calcium in a manner that allows the garden to regulate, I want to say, think for itself. It's a great balancing influence. Who knew that your garden could think? Then we have dandelion, that's BD506, and that provides the garden soil with a fine-tuned ability to sense and draw the right amount of what it needs. But it also acts like a filter. You know, us humans, we have a liver that filters continuously our blood and filters out toxins. Well, dandelion in this preparation acts like the liver of the garden. So you tell me, that's one of the reasons we can regenerate the land so beautifully. And then finally, in that compost segment, that's the last one of the composting compounds or preparations, that's BD507, and that's valerian. Valerian is more like the icing on the compost cake and also on the field and garden spray. It actually helps to seal in beneficial forces. And here we are also dealing with cosmic forces, and the elementals love when everything comes together for them too. And it really helps when the biodynamic compost is then distributed over your garden beds. The valerian then helps to release all that goodness into the earth and doesn't allow it to escape. That's why valerian is very, very important in these 6 compost or part of garden and field preparations. So then we have 3 more. One is Equisetum avens. Now, Equisetum you may know more as horsetail. And you may say, well, you know, especially if you have a more wet area, oh, I have horsetail growing all over the place. Excellent, but make sure it's the avens. How do you know whether it is the right horsetail? Because it has to be avens, or the others as a biodynamic formula could actually be toxic. If you cut a stalk off and look at the profile, the avens has a definite, it has a square. It's similar to a salvia stalk, right? If it is not the avens, it looks, if you look through, especially through a, well, I use glasses or stronger glasses or a little magnifying glass, you actually see a hexagonal shape or more round shape. You don't want to use those in biodynamics. But if you have the avens, the Equisetum avens, it is an amazing solution to combat noxious pests, but also foliar fungi like mildew. You know, if you have roses, and occasionally there might be some mildew or some other fungi, but it has to be foliar fungi. We do not want to destroy the fungi in the soil, obviously. But this is an amazing help and can be used as often as needed. When you see an onset of a little fungi, prepare some equisetum. And again, you know, the stirring and all of that, we'll go into that in great detail. And then we also have the Three Kings preparation. I'm going to hold up the jar. This is a very special preparation. And I'll open it, but I'll close it very shortly again. Can you see it? Yeah. And I'm going to actually lock it up because I don't want it to be subjected to too much light. The Three Kings preparation has, as you probably can guess, frankincense, myrrh, and gold in it. And, you know, a lot of you already know, but New Year's Eve, any decent biodynamic gardener spends between 11:30 on New Year's Eve to 12:30 on New Year's Day, as we move into the New Year's Day, grinding up for a whole hour the frankincense and the myrrh, which are in a resin, and then the gold. I get that from the whole preparation from the raw materials from the Josephine Porter Institute. I use a mortar and pestle and grind away for an hour in a really meditative state. Why? Because we try to attract the elemental forces into the formula and later into the garden. And then we add a little glycerin, vegetable glycerin. Joseph Porter Institute provides that. They even added a little vial of rainwater. I mean, good heavens, who knew? And then you make it into a paste, and that's what you saw just a moment ago. And that you can store in the jar like I have it in for approximately 5 years. You do not refrigerate any of these products. But they ought to be stored in a place where there's no light, ideally in a wooden box. And I store all my biodynamic preparations in my broom closet, which also is, and that's a good way for me anyway. You choose your own if you ever do that. And then on the 6th of January, that's the day of Epiphany. And I did this with my lovely friend, those who weren't here at the beginning. My best friend, Terry House, has a magnificent organic garden, well established, and she's just converting it and converted it to a biodynamic. And of course, we do it all together. So the lovely Terry came over. And on the 6th, and we started about 2 o'clock, because first one has to dissolve it, and then one needs to put it in pure water, and then we stirred it in this wonderful creating vortexes and counter vortexes for 1 hour, and it should be applied close to 4 in the afternoon. And this is not applied just liberally across, but one walks the periphery of one's property and flicks it with a whisk broom toward the property. And every so often we do a flick to the outside, helps our neighbors too. But what it does is we invite thereby the elemental forces, and that energy that we emit moves totally into the center and encompasses the entire garden and even the house that it stands on. We do it in a very meditative way. Those of you who know me on Facebook, I have posted, since I'm establishing a brand new garden just on the 6th of this month, a little bit of a how to stir it. And yesterday I posted that, where if you are on Facebook, you see me stir it for just, Terry took the picture for 30 seconds to see what a vortex looks like and how to disturb the vortex. But it is an amazing preparation that really protects your garden. And what I like about it, it also engages you into the new year in a very creative, dynamic way. And, you know, to invite those elemental forces is what we do in biodynamics. It's just an amazing preparation. And there's one more, and that is the tree paste. You may say, what on earth is that? Well, good question. We use clay. You can certainly, if you have a very clay soil, harvest your own clay, but make sure you get rid of all the stones and so forth. So you have really just about pure clay left. But you can also use potter's clay, and that's a really good one. And then a little horn manure goes into it, but also a little sand. And then you can use either pure water or a prepared equisetum, the horsetail, but it has to be prepared and already stirred properly. And then you add a little of that and you make it into a paste, kind of the consistency of pancake batter, a thicker pancake batter. And late in the fall, I want to say end of October, beginning of November, you paint it on the tree trunk with a paintbrush, a clean one, preferably a new one. And you really go into every nook and cranny of the cambium. The cambium is that outer layer of the trunk. It has more than one purpose, as it always does in biodynamics. It brings a life-enhancing stimulus into your tree. So the tree then has a more balanced fruitfulness, which is, you know, later on very important, but it always also prevents pests from overwintering. And here think codling moths. They usually overwinter in loose bark, in loose tree bark. If we paint it, however, with the tree paste, they don't overwinter there. And that may seem cruel, but we don't want them there. They can go to a neighbor garden. It's not where you will never, ever have codling moths because they will come in from elsewhere. But it is unbelievably good. Sorry, but I heard a no. So tree, but it should. Yes. Sorry?
I'm laughing at your giving that to the neighbor. I just love that.
Well, so one thing is it should not be applied on a shrub only when there's a proper tree trunk with a cambium. It's especially good for fruiting trees, but it can be applied to any tree. It really creates a much more stronger tree because, again, we enhance it with all the goodness that these various products, it becomes just really amazing. So composting we will discuss in great depth. As I mentioned before, we are creating a colloidal compost using the BD 502 through 507. And also you can have an enclosed compost. I have that because I don't have enough material to actually form twice a year a biodynamic compost pile, but I will teach you that in lesson 3, how to do that. But the colloidal compost is so important. It is so packed in nutrients, but furthermore, it also holds 10 times its weight in water. In our dry region, that is essential. But even if you're not in a dry region, colloidal compost is just manna from the heaven. Until you've encompassed the colloidal compost, you don't know what you've missed all those years. And then we also very much promote green manure, also known as cover crops. And they can be in the form of legumes. Think Austrian winter peas, lentil, fava beans. Hairy vetch is very good. Oats, barley, clover. And these are specifically good in annual beds. When you have after you've harvested your vegetables before the frost comes, you put the seeds down. If there isn't enough rain, make sure they are moist so they can germinate, and over fall and winter they can grow. When in the spring, then you can cut them right at soil level, or you can gently turn them in as you plant your new crop. And we probably may have a few nascent gardeners among our lovely friends here. But the most important thing with cover crops is it releases, for most of those plants, nitrogen directly to the plant roots. You may say, why is that important? Well, plant roots need usually an intermediary, so-called soil bacteria, to break down the minerals so the plants can absorb it. This is not true for cover crop. That can be directly absorbed. But you may, for those who don't know what soil bacteria has to do with all of it, I'll give you a kind of a funny description. Soil bacteria is very important, and the better the soil, the more soil bacteria it contains. So there you go. The soil bacteria, it's of course microscopic in size, latches on to the plant root and goes, hey, are you going to give me some of your sugar? Quite literally, because it's plant sugar that this soil bacteria needs. And the plant goes, well, let me see, what are you doing in return for me? And the soil bacteria said, well, I break down the minerals so you can thrive. Plant says, done deal. And they have the best symbiotic relationship. In the cover crops, the soil bacteria is really not so much needed, but you still want an abundance of soil bacteria. You also may ask, where do I get my seeds? Because ideally, yes, you can use organic seeds. Eventually they get transformed into biodynamic seeds, but I get my seeds almost exclusively from turtle tree seed. They're from upstate New York. Turtle, T-U-R-T-L-E, seed, tree seed, and they only deal in biodynamic seeds. And they also have a great mixture of cover crops. Before I open it up to questions now, in biodynamics, we start and begin with a verse. So I'll end with a verse. And you can just relax, sit back, and just listen. It won't take long. To stones at rest around their roots, to soil that feed their tender shoots, the plants bend low in many ranks to offer up their humble thanks. To green and growing plants and trees, to apples, carrots, grains, and peas, to beasts of water, air, and land, to plants that all around us stand, to rocks so firm beneath our feet, we all give thanks and humbly greet. Thank you all so much for your perseverance, and now let's open it up for questions.
Thanks very much, Gerlinde. I should reappear. There were a couple of questions, and one was, could you repeat or spell the name of the preparation for fungus, please?
Yes, equisetum. Here we go. So I don't make a spelling mistake. I would never forgive myself. E-Q-U-I S-E-T-U-M as in Mary, and Arvense is A-R-V-E-N-S-E. Equisetum arvense.
Thanks. I hope that answered the question. The next one is from Phil Lonnie, and Phil asked more on colloidal compost. And I think what I would like to do is actually ask Phil if you would come on and maybe say a little bit more about what it is that you would like for Gerlinde to do, to describe.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Well, excuse me, I don't know if I'm a beginner or whatever, but what I've heard of colloidal silver, but what's in colloidal compost?
Okay. Hello, Philip. It's lovely that you are part of us. Philip and I are friends, and he's also part of our Talent Garden Club. Okay, compost, regular organic compost is usually a little bit crumbly, right? Colloidal compost holds together and is a little sticky. It has a sheen to it. It doesn't, it's not dripping wet, but it's neither dry. It has that slightly sheen, sticky quality. That's what a colloidal compost is. We really form a colloid. And yeah, it's similar to colloidal silver, of course, but it has a very different application.
So does that mean that I can just purchase this, or do I have to make it myself?
You can purchase it, but I will go through compost, through the products next time so that you understand it. And we really go quite deeply into what that really means. It's very important because to us that is our food for the soil, and that is of vital importance. You know, in biodynamics, we have the lunar cycles, we have the preparations, and the colloidal compost. These are the three ingredients that create a biodynamic garden. And it is absolutely amazing. Once you've seen the colloidal compost, there's no comparison.
Thanks, Phil. The next, did you have a follow-up on that? No, but his dog does. Okay, Phil, I hope that answered your question. If you have further questions about it, please let us know. Elizabeth Shepler said she loved how you personally illustrated the stories and that was helpful for her. But Elizabeth, can I ask you to come on, because it says, could you please recommend a good beginner, but I'm not sure a beginner what.
I know, I'm sorry. I accidentally pushed return, but I continued it a couple of comments down. This is all kind of overwhelming because this is new to me. And so I was wondering if you could recommend a text that would be good for
Yes,
beginners.
that's a very good question. What I would recommend is go on the website of Josephine Porter, Porter Institute, as well as Turtle Tree Seed. And they have a lot of articles that you can read up. Often there are some biodynamic books that have been written, and they are just not, you know, they are so overwhelming where you go, I'll never do this. It's just too much. Where do you live, Elizabeth?
I live just outside of Ashland. Our home burned down,
I'm
and
so sorry.
so thank you. And
Elizabeth, I live in the southern end of Talent, and I will give you all my email actually in a moment, because, you know, I would be happy if you came from time to time and you can experience it in person maybe.
Yes, okay, please.
And for everyone here, my email is, now don't expect miracles. You know, I'm very good at replying to emails, or, you know, but it's like with text messages, I'm not right there because I don't carry electronic gadgets with me. So at the end of the day or the following day, I will get back with you, but don't expect an immediate answer. So my email is very easy. One word, gardenintalent@gmail.com. And you can definitely email me, and I can that way get in touch with you too. And in Elizabeth's case, you know, we can stay in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Subsequent question from Sarah was, what is the name of the moon sign app? She did not say it in the notes above, but I think it's the one that is Rhythms of Nature.
Rhythms of
right?
Nature. And if you wanted for the cell phone, Moon Reader, as in reading, Moon
That's
Reader.
an app, right?
It's an app and it's free. And there are apps that cost a little money, but they're not as good as, I find at least, as Moon Reader. I went through so many apps and I go, they're just a waste of money.
Okay, and so Moon Reader, that's all one word?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so hopefully you all will be able to find that. And, you know, since you've made an invitation to Elizabeth to come to your place, I don't know if that's open to everyone. Obviously, people who live in Washington might not be able to stop by.
No, well,
Others might.
also, you know, I have about a third of my garden planted.
Mhm.
It won't be until really late spring to summer till I can say, come on in. But when Terry and I do our preparations, which will be, the next one will be undoubtedly BD 500 horn manure, or we do another field and garden spray, I can definitely allow someone to come. I can't have, of course, a horde of people because the garden is very nascent and I can't people walk in the garden yet. They'll come later. And so, but I can say this is how the preparation is done. So those are the things we can definitely open up, but just to a small amount of people. Yeah.
So we will have an
Sadly.
opportunity to bring a larger number of people out when we do some of these things at the garden that's in
Phoenix.
Phoenix, right, at Blue Heron, because that that park was also touched by fire. It was very strange. It burned a lot of the plants, but our signs for some reason remained intact, which I will never quite understand. So we're going to do a lot to help rejuvenate that garden. And if people want to know more about this on a practical side, we'll be doing that there. And then probably just a little bit prior to that, we'll be working at Phoenix Industrial Studios in Phoenix, Oregon, because we have a front area where we've been invited to do pollinator plantings, and those will not be biodynamic, but we will be observing organic principles and some of the celestial.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, even if you don't go biodynamic, although I just live for biodynamics, you can probably tell. I get very enthused about that. You know, just planting by the lunar zodiac makes a huge difference in your garden, because the plants will be much more stronger, more tasty, and those fruit-bearing ones much more fruitful. And that's what we want. The biodynamic, you know, and sometimes it takes a person, they go, well, I can do this year, next year I want to incorporate more. You can't call yourself biodynamic, but you can say I'm transitioning to biodynamics, and that is really fine too. But you know, it is, for me, I've done it for decades, ever since I was born. I grew up with it, but with the preparations that you now can get at the Josephine Porter Institute, it's so much easier. And I want to also say, we don't have a lot of biodynamic farms in Oregon. Well, there might be some that aren't certified, and I know many farms in Colorado that were absolutely biodynamic but didn't get certified because everyone knew them anyway. But we do have a vineyard right here in Talent. My former neighbor and good friend Terry Sullivan owns with his partner Molly Upper Fife. Upper Fife is a vineyard off Wagner Creek, and exactly almost to the day he became a certified biodynamic vineyard, as is Cowhorn in cowhorn, how appropriate, in the Applegate Valley. There are more vineyards now. It's really interesting. I just want to mention that. I'm part of the International Association of Demeter or Biodynamic, same thing. And I looked up, you know, I come from Austria. Austria is about a third of the size of Oregon. And there are over 70 certified biodynamic vineyards, but the wine growing region is really tiny. I mean, you could fit that into the Rogue Valley easily. And here in Oregon, I think we have 4 or 5. It's amazing. And you see, you know, what I regret is we don't have here farms that grow biodynamic grain, because to me, that is the non plus ultra in producing grain, where I bet you a lot of people who have grain sensitivity, gluten sensitivity, would not have that if they consumed biodynamic grain.
I'm going to ask Dolly, did you have a question?
No, no.
Okay. I see the little symbol that says that your hand is up, so it was a little better for me to figure that out.
We love you, Dolly.
And there's another, so Annie Drager says she lives in Phoenix and she wants to visit, absolutely. And so I will have her contact you.
Please, absolutely.
On the backstory? Okay.
Yes. And you know, right now, because you know, the plants on the outer level are in their dormant state, we don't do much gardening in the winter. It's also a good time for a bit of introspection, where we go a little bit within, but I will say, as a biodynamic gardener, I personally immerse myself in all the elements, whether it's sun, wind, or rain. You don't have to be out there for hours on end, but even if it's a few minutes, because you are part of this wonderful organism, and you should also experience any of the weather conditions. It's very important because you are a very integral part in this whole organism that is your property.
There's another question or statement from Annie Drager, and she says that she'd like to know about the health of plants that haven't died in the fire at Blue Heron Pollinator Garden. And I suspect that what you might also be inclined to talk about is how the elemental energies were affected by this prolonged period of fire. In rescuing some items from my own home, I know that those fires burned for about 3 days. Mm-hmm. And there was I can only describe it, it was a very peculiar energy to some of the items that I retrieved from my home, and particularly pottery. So fires were burning above ground, underground. And what effect did that have on elemental energies? And
sadly, a very sad one. And the reason being is, whenever there's a lot of toxicity released, and the fires undoubtedly did that, the elementals basically leave the area. They leave that. They will return again once things start to regenerate, and there's an earnest willingness of the people to work in a proper manner with the earth, because there are also many people who have sprayed various pesticides and biocides, basically, or so-called fertilizers like weed and feed. I don't even know what's all out there these days. The elemental forces do not like those things, and they leave those areas pretty much almost untouched. But when they see a willingness of the people, they come back, and then they really become very strong again. But it depends on us, because we have the ball in our courts. We can create horrible landscapes with, monoculture and all those chemicals, or we can really work with the earth. And so when we do that, we have a prolific body of elementals that will join us again. You are silent. Any Sharon, we can't hear you.
There we go. I was wanting to know if anybody wanted to offer any final thoughts or closing statements or questions before we end. Well, I would just like to thank you, Gerlinde. This has been really, really interesting, and I'm looking forward to the next presentation on February 7th, which will be a Sunday. We'll do it at the same time, and very excited about this and what we can do to invite good energy essentially back into our domain.
And just think of what it does for everyone that's part of creating a better world, and here biodynamic one. It will enhance your energy, it will enhance your health. And this is doubly important. You know, so many people are so afraid of COVID-19 and feel, oh my God, now we are really trapped. But when we work in this biodynamic way, we boost our immune system. We do so many things. And, you know, I might be old and look old, but I actually have an enormous vitality and energy. I really do. And those who know me know that I do. But to me, it's important to also be part of this and really be that vibrant part of a biodynamic garden. And everyone that will do that will, you know, it transforms you as a person.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely got that sense. So Terry Trantham said, thank you, loved your presentation. Jolene was, thank you so much, Gerlinde, you're so wise. Julie Green, thank you for a thorough, insightful, and loving introduction to biodynamic gardening. Laura Panicott to everybody. Gerlinde, thank you so much for this talk. You're awesome and never cease to amaze me. And then there's Phil says, love your mojo.
Well, I thank you all so much, because I know there's so much to absorb, so much to take in. I know that. I really do. I've worked as a volunteer on 2 biodynamic farms, and there were many apprentices who were always, oh my God, we're going to be right by your side. And this was kind of, you know, in a practical way where it was step by step, but I unleashed a lot of information today. And so, and bombarded you, but there's more to come. There's a lot to be learned. And, you know, you might take on a few things, or you kind of go, well, I need to digest it more and then I'll do that. But you will never, ever regret it. That I can promise you.
Thank you. And for those of you who do get a chance to work with us in the future, when you get to smell some of these preparations, I think you'll understand the whole idea about an angelic element on a whole different level. Thank you, Gerlinde. Thank you all for coming. And
Thank you.
We have 4 more messages. Let me just go through this quickly. Shannon King said she would also love to be invited to your garden, touching on vertical gardening, which she's been exploring on her own. Kristen said, thank you. Very cool info. Can't wait to try the moon sign planting. And Karen Layfield, thanks, Gerlinde. Always learning from you. And there you have it. 1 more. And Terry Transom says, me too. Terry's going to want to come over to your place too.
Perfect. We'll have a lot of stirrers. Although, you know, when we just did the 3 Kings preparation, my lovely friend Terry House and me, you become very invigorated in that stirring, because it's, you know, you're part of it, and you become, you know, people go, an hour? No, an hour goes by so fast, I guarantee you. And we can show you some tricks how to stir with a minimum of muscular output, but more you go with the flow. And I also teach qigong and tai chi, so, you know, I use, and so does my friend Terry. We use the force, you might say.
Very good. And anybody else would like to say something, please do so now. I want to thank you all for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gerlinde, thank you for giving us hope. It feels,
Yes.
I feel hope and inspiration. Thank
I
you.
second,
Thank you,
I
Margaret.
second that. Yes, I second that.
Thank you.
Bye, Gerlinda. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for running
you.
this too. Bye, guys.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you.
Karen.
It's very, very organized, very inspirational. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
hi, Scott.
You're off.
Sorry, I was on at the right time. I was doing so many things and I didn't want to be a distraction.
No, that's great.
But I did record all of this so I can re-listen, absorb, and I also started a notebook. I've actually been studying of what I'm a stay-at-home mom who's affected or working very part-time now, but I was affected by the fire, relocated and everything, and that was my home for 8 years. So I'm trying to find some hope in this, and I've been on my own studying a wide variety of things, and this is an entirely new subject I'm really excited about, but I can relate to from what I've already been studying. So that's great.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I truly hope everything will unfold beautifully for you and you can move forward. It's a tough time.
Yeah, I feel so bonded to the area. So it's every time driving through is so devastating because of the life that I got to have there.
Yes.
And the way that that has just been so violently destroyed and
Yeah.
not available to go home back to. So I'm trying to make some sort of peace with that because that still
Yeah.
feels like home, even though it's completely absent, and it's a huge cultural experience. And I'm really concerned with the cultural aspect of what that does, and want to be a part of that solution.
Well, and I also hope with these talks that we can form a group where we come together in, through biodynamics and create a support group and also help people to see the light.
Be able to access healing, be able to benefit from cooperation with the earth. I
Indeed.
get that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shannon.
And thank you, Gerlinda. It's Dolly.
Thank you, Dolly. I love you.
It was so great. It really was.
Thank you.
All right. Also, thanks to Allison Fairbanks and Phoenix Industrial Studios. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Wonderful. Hi, Scott.
Where?